This episode of Warp 5 is brought to you by Audible.com, offering more than 150,000 titles for your smartphone, tablet, or desktop. To get a free audiobook of your choice, visit audibletrial.com/TrekFM. Also, help us keep Star Trek discussion coming to you each day by becoming a Trek FM patron through Patreon. Get access to exclusive content and become part of the team. You'll find all the details at patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM.
Hi, I'm Anthony Montgomery, Ensign Travis Mayweather on Star Trek Enterprise, and you're listening to Trek FM.
How we doing, Trip? Ready when you are. Prepare for warp.
Course laid in, sir. Request permission to get underway. Let's go.
Welcome, Boomers, to another episode of Warp 5, Trek FM's dedicated Enterprise show. I'm your host, Floyd Dorsey, and I just received a cryptic message a short time ago from Melodic Trek's host, Brandon-Shea Mutala, telling me to meet him in a very unusual place. So I've got to tell you, I'm standing in a damp, dark, foggy alleyway in a shady part of our future San Francisco. And wait a minute, there he is. There's Brandon. Brandon, why in the world are we meeting here and not in the Admiral's office or on board the Enterprise?
Shh. Too loud, man. We gotta be quiet. This is a secret place here, okay?
Oh, we're supposed to be whispering?
Yeah, this is some secret stuff here, okay? We got some
so
information
what's secret? What's going on? What have you got me into here?
So tonight we've got an interview with Harris from Section 31. Eric Pierpoint.
Oh, okay. Well, let's just. Do you know him? How did you get contacted with him? What happened?
I was talking into my computer and I was just getting frustrated about a couple of things, saying I needed help, and all of a sudden my computer just started talking to me and saying, all these weird glitchy files came up and said, you know what, meet me here in this alley. So after that I put tape over my video camera thing.
Oh, great. You've got me mixed in with a Section 31 agent. Thanks a lot.
I'm sorry, man. But he said I had to bring Floyd.
Okay. Well, when he gets here, you go ahead and introduce me then, because that way I can at least have some deniability going on. All right.
But I got to say, I'm very, very excited that we got this interview with Eric Pierpoint tonight. This guy's had a career that's spanned several decades. He's done many different roles. He was George Francisco on Alien Nation, and he's been on Matlock. What else has he been on?
Parks and Rec. Lately, he's been on CSI. He's been on Hill Street Blues way back in the day, and of course, he's been on every Star Trek series after the original series. So this guy, he's been around the block a little bit here with Star Trek. He knows what's going on.
So maybe we can all build a time machine, and then he can go back in time, and we can get him actually on the original series with William Shatner, and then he can just be on all of them.
Wow, that would be the home run, definitely touching all the bases kind of a thing for the actor if he could do that. But yeah, he actually played two actors, or he had two roles on Enterprise. Then some people might not realize he was on Rogue Planet as Sherratt, one of the hunters that was looking for the Wraith. And then, of course, the most recognizable role is Agent Harris.
What you said? Which was the first episode he's on? You said he was on the new Star Wars Rogue One.
No, not quite.
Oh,
it was Rogue Planet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, though we don't want to get people too around there, but he said he was working on something he can't talk about, so he might show up there too.
Do I hear the transporter beaming in our guest now?
Okay, well you just go ahead and introduce me then, and we'll get started from there.
And joining us today is Eric Pierpoint, a very famous actor who's done numerous roles in film and television. How are you doing today, Eric?
I'm great, Brandon. How are you doing?
I'm doing absolutely fantastic. First, I just want to start by saying thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us today about your acting and, as we'll get into, your writing career as well.
Sure, thank you. And we're on with Floyd as well, right?
Yep.
Yeah, we got Floyd here.
So yeah, you didn't lose me. You didn't lose me.
Sorry to wake you up there, Floyd.
Sorry, yeah.
Okay.
So your first film credited on IMDb is Windy City from 1984. How did you get into acting, and how's the audition process changed over the years?
Well, okay. It's the way I got into it is I was in college, if you want to go back that far, which is pretty far, and I really began my life on stage. I felt very attracted to that. And when I got out of undergrad school, I kind of went away from it for a few years, but then I went back to graduate school to study classical theater and get a master's degree. So after doing probably 50 or 60 plays and all kinds of different things in the Washington, D.C. area, I ended up in New York City. And I was in a play actually back in D.C., going back and forth. I was living in New York. And I got a call from a casting director named Diane Crittenden. And she said to me that I saw you do this commercial spot. And I thought, if you could do that, I need to see you. We're casting this new movie. Can you come up? So I flew up and read for the part. And it was sort of like how can I say, like a Big Chill kind of a movie, a bunch of guys in their 30s trying to figure life out. And as I was heading to the elevator after the audition, the casting assistant came running as the elevator doors were closing, and they said they really liked you, but can you come back and read a different part? And so I came back and read a different part. Well, I went back and forth. I ended up reading probably about 5 different parts. And I think I broke them down. And eventually they gave me a part I never read for. And so that kind of kicked everything off. And then what happens in this business is once you get something like that, then people start talking about it and they want to know who the new person is. And so while that was going on, I was being tested, flown out from New York on did screen tests for various television projects. And that's something they hardly ever do anymore. And so much of it now is digital. But back then, you had to be in the room in person. And we're getting such good feedback, and I got close to a couple of things, that I decided that I would stay out in California. And I lived at the Chateau Marmont Hotel for 2 months as Windy City was in post-production. So we shot Windy City, and now I then land a pilot that turned into a series for NBC called Hot Pursuit, which was about sort of like a fugitive type of show, action sort of love affair show, husband and wife on the run from the law. And so I established some great relationships from that. And over the course of the years, the executive producer, Ken Johnson of Hot Pursuit, went on to do a lot of other things that I was in, as well as Alien Nation. And he also had been executive producer on things like, on shows like Bionic Woman and $6 Million Man and Incredible Hulk, and he wrote V. So that's kind of what the kickoff for the television and film career started with Windy City, more or less, and has just been going since then. And you asked me about the audition process. Mm-hmm. Most of the time in the past, if you auditioned for something, you would have producers and directors and sometimes writers in the room with you. And for some shows, you still do. But I would say 80% of the time, if your agent has called you and said you've got a meeting on something like tomorrow, I'm going in on a Seth MacFarlane project, and you're in there these days almost always with a casting director and maybe a casting assistant and a camera, and most of the time that's it. And they send they tape it, record it, and they'll send it to the director and the producer, and then it gets sent on to the network or the studio. So you're kind of removed oftentimes from the creative people, and you're kind of there with casting directors that you've mostly known, over the years as I have. So that's one thing that's changed. Another thing that's changed is that if they decide not to have a session, or if they're, let's say, in Canada, they'll say, can you put yourself on tape, and send it. So here you are in your living room with your iPhone and, kind of recording yourself and then emailing it off to wherever it goes. And that's something that, of course, never, but now people are doing movies on iPhone, so who knows?
So you still have to do auditions? People aren't just throwing scripts at you now, Eric?
I wish they would. I did. I actually, as ironically, that you should say this. My neighbor is a director of photography. He's done a lot of big movies, and he knocked on my door this morning, and he said, "What are you doing Friday? We're shooting this commercial that Rob Lowe is going to do, and can you do it?" And I said, "What?" And he says, "Yeah, Alex Graves, who has directed Game of Thrones, West Wing, and all kinds of different things. So Alex is directing it, and we want you to play the part of the director of the commercial." So I said, "Okay." So, I mean, how weird that is. We're at each other's barbecues. So I just thought it was great, and that's kind of the thing that I'm negotiating right now, is a combination of a job that is doing something on Friday, which is actually my birthday, so I had to cancel other things, as well as have a barbecue for the same people on Sunday. So that's a freaky thing.
You have a very impressive IMDb page. I mean, you've been on several popular films, Liar Liar, Transformers 2, and also some really great television shows like Parks and Rec, CSI, Star Trek, and Alien Nation. So on Alien Nation, you played George Francisco. What was it like playing a character that had been established by another actor, and how did you make that role your own?
There's a little bit of history in that, and Alien Nation will probably remain as, unless something else comes along where am that absorbed and challenged by one of my all-time favorite projects. And Ken Johnson, who I just mentioned as having been one of the first producers in LA I worked with, he called me up and he said, "I want you, I've been asked to do Alien Nation television series, and I want you to be in it." And I said, "Well, yeah, I've seen it. I went and I saw Mandy Patinkin and James Caan, and I thought the whole setup was great. I thought, that was kind of a highly anticipated film back in 87 or 8 or whenever it was, because a lot of that stuff was fairly new. So I said, well, let me look at it again. So I went out and I rented it, and I thought, James Caan, did this and whatever. And I was thinking that he was asking me to play the James Caan role, Sykes role. And so I said, "Yeah, Kenny, I'd love to, do it. I'd love, I thought James." He said, No, I want you to play George Francisco. I said, "What, the alien?" And he says, "Absolutely, because the way I know you, I think it's a great fit." And I said, "Well, let me look at it again." So I went back and I got it, and I looked at it and I went, "Oh, absolutely." And the reason for me was there's a certain kind of liberation or freedom, believe it or not, when you put it on this makeup, where you begin to lose your own ego. You're not as attached to your own ego as if you're, when you're playing a leading man, let's say. And so you get to explore all of these other aspects of yourself, but yet to try to keep it real. But once you get the makeup on, then you begin to kind of figure out, where everything is coming from. It's not like you're just throwing on a head and you're just you. You just try to blend all of these things together. But the other thing that made that work so much for me was having studied a lot of, classical theater and Shakespeare and British comedy and whatever, as well as American classics and dramas. You could, he's an alien. Who's to say? You can't go from this to that, make these extreme kinds of changes. So I felt going to work every day was a huge challenge, but such a great experience. And, like Gary Graham, who played the Sykes character in Alien Nation, and we would play opposites. It's like, if he's like this, I'm like that. If I'm like that, he's like this. So it was a bit of a I don't know. There were ways that we could, still be partners, cops, but be very, very opposite. But somehow the dance worked, and those were. If we didn't laugh every day, it would be torture. Because as Star Trek people know, when you're in makeup and you're in makeup every day, and you're there at 3:00 in the morning, you also better be having a good time, because it's difficult. It's stressful because the makeup and the glue and everything is on your face, and it itches and it's hot. You're sweating. So there are a lot of challenges, and if you're doing it every day, it builds up. If you're a recurring role or a guest star, you've got some time off. But I think that creatively, if you really have a great character that you can explore, it makes those hours pass a lot quicker.
What was the prosthetics that they used? Did they just use some kind of a rubber thing to put over your head to cover your hair?
Yeah, what it was first they take a mold. So they do a plaster, I guess, a mold of your head, and then they take that off. So they have this, like, of your face, for example, and then they will sculpt it, and then they will, they'll do a prosthetic, a pouring, and so they have the main head that they use, and then they can almost, create a lot of different, almost like caps for you. So with the way it worked with me is that the piece went right under both eyelids and cut down the side of each side of my face, and then around back, so that it covers your hair, and it had little, ear holes for your ears. And so that, it was very confining and annoying. But on the other hand, it made it work, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, if you're playing a Klingon, which I played, I remember I was sitting in the chair at 2:45 or so, for the first shot to be at 6:30, because I'm sure they had other Klingons to do, and they got to get all the people ready for a first shot. And that was a fairly long process, because it's just like, if you're doing a guest star as a Klingon, then they are going to try to do as much custom for you as you can. Like, they'll take a mold, they'll take like a mold of your mouth, of your teeth, give you some fake teeth, and other things. And, of course, when you're playing, if you're doing Star Trek, you got to be a Klingon at some point. Don't you?
Sure. Okay. Well, you mentioned being a Klingon, and you actually appeared on every Star Trek series after the original. So you were on TNG, you were on DS9, you were on Barge of the Dead. That's you played Kortar on Barge of the Dead on Voyager. And so, were you actually a fan of Star Trek before you got your first part on TNG, or was it just
I was a fan of Star Trek when I was in college, which was 1969 to 1973. Okay. And when I was Star Trek, first aired in like 66 or something? Is that right? Or 7 or
66?
Okay. Okay. So I was not a fan when it first came out. However, when I got to be a freshman in college, and I learned how to be a freshman in college and what that meant going from being an athlete, a jock, to college, where you learned all kinds of things that were bad for you. And one of the things that we always did, I had a roommate who was into a lot more things than I was in terms of, acid rock. And, he had all of the toys. He had the reel-to-reel tape going. He had the Christmas lights in the, going, to his music and stuff. And by God, there was a certain smell in the area. And so, you kind of go with it. And he had a 9-inch black and white TV, and he watched Star Trek. Star Trek was on every night in a rerun, I think around 6 o'clock or something like that, or 7 o'clock at night. And I kept saying, what do you get it? What is it? He says, you got to sit down and watch this. So I started watching it, and I got hooked. And I thought, oh my God, what is this? This is fantastic. I can't believe what they're doing. Because it was so fresh and different. And I had never really had the time, or didn't really care about watching it. And and then he looked at me at one point and he said, wouldn't it be great if you were on a show like that? So I thought, yeah, and I didn't think anything of it. So we watched it. We were roommates for the whole 4 years. And I began, my acting career kind of as a senior in college, as just going into the theater department. And I'll say that it was somewhat responsible for getting me interested, because I began to be a lot more interested in these kinds of, characters and these kinds of ideas. So that was interesting to have that happen. And then going through the Alien Nation, when Alien Nation aired and then it was over, they were casting Next Generation. So within, I guess, when did Next Gen first air? Was that like 91 or 2?
87.
Yeah.
Was 87?
87, yeah.
I'll be darned. Okay, so I guess that happened. I must have gone in. That's odd. I didn't have that right. I must have gone in before Alien Nation then. They saw me as the Riker, for the Riker character.
Oh.
I have to say that would be really cool, so.
Oh, it would have been really a lot of fun, but I ended up playing the Ambassador of Love, Volval, I believe it is.
Yeah.
For that, where when I got the script, I said, wait, I turn into a woman? How are they going to do that? I'm trying to think about that. I'm thinking, I don't think I'd make a very good looking woman. So then, of course, they double casted. They had Barbara Williams to play me as I turned into a woman, to investigate the concept of love with Picard, and fell flat on my face in terms of I didn't get anywhere, and I felt like I failed. And then after I turned back from her back into me. So I thought, okay, So after all of that, each Star Trek along the way, I remember they saw me when they were doing, Deep Space. They were looking for the captain. And by that time, both Gary Graham and I I can't remember if he was called in for that, but I went in to audition for Avery Brooks' part. And then we were told that no, they were going to go with Avery Brooks. And I, of course, Star Trek, they should. And then when Voyager came out, there was a bit of a kerfuffle there with trying to figure out casting. And Kate Mulgrew ended up with a role after, who was it, Genevieve Bujold?
Yep, Genevieve Bujold, yep.
Yeah, okay. And she, I think, left the part. So there was a brief moment when they were trying to figure out whether they were going to recast with a woman or a man. I don't know if you guys know that. Did you ever hear that part?
I've heard that story, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So once again, I was in the room. And so they ended up with her. And, okay. So then I find myself as, I didn't get Avery Brooks's part, but I got to play a captain and have my ship shot out from under me, Captain Sanders. And then I got to play Kotar and be on captain of the barge of the dead on the River of Blood. That was very cool. So at least each step along the way, I'm not getting that big thing, but they are giving me stuff, right? So I've always had this great relationship with the Star Trek people, and I always loved it, always loved doing them. And then eventually with Enterprise, to go on and play a character who, 3 hunters on hunting an intelligent game on the Dark Planet, which I remember actually, I think that was like an old either Outer Limits or Twilight Zone concept. You guys remember that?
Oh, I never heard of that.
Yeah, I believe the story is based on or was a similar story as to another sci-fi show. Not sure which one it was. Maybe your listeners know exactly what it was. But of hunters and hunting intelligent game, and aliens hunting intelligent game. So it was like a real moral dilemma. And when after I finished that show, and I had a great time on doing that, they called me back in because they were considering me for another Klingon role. Obviously not the same. And so when I got in to meet with the producers, they started looking at each other and they said, hang on. Now, we know you've already played a Klingon. We have this other part. Would you mind taking the script out and looking at it for a while and coming back in and reading this for us? He's human, and it's this sort of secret kind of like recurring role of a guy named Harris. And that's what happened. I went out for 20 minutes or so and came back in and read it, and then next thing I know, that's what I'm doing on Enterprise. And I had a great time on that opposite Dominic. So it's sort of this whole relationship for many, many years that I've had with science fiction and Star Trek. It's been a really terrific experience for me.
I've got to say, you've appeared on Enterprise twice. First, you were Sherratt on Rogue Planet. That's where you were the hunter. And you were the Section 31 agent as Harris. So it seems like they just like keeping you in dark settings. You're hanging out on Dark Planet hunting. And they got you in the dark.
Yeah, on the barge.
Right?
Yeah. Whatever. And maybe, whatever happens with the next, the next version of Star Trek, who knows? Maybe they'll bring me back as an ancient wizard.
Well, it's the new show is only it's about 100 years after Enterprise, right? It takes place just before the original series, so maybe we could see an elder Harris again.
Yeah, really, really old Harris.
Well, I mean, you're Section 31, so you can do all kinds of stuff.
I can do whatever I want, right?
Right. So,
okay.
How much did you know about Section 31's CD past or the type of role before you filmed it? Did you know anything about Section 31?
Absolutely nothing. I didn't know anything. I knew I had a vague idea of what it was. I was actually filled in by a security guard on the set, if you can believe that.
Wow.
Yeah. So one of the guards on the set, and I was getting ready to get in there, and I've been asking it, and I went through hair and I went through makeup and wardrobe and all that, and he said, "So what do you know?" And I said, "I really don't know how." Well, let me fill you in. He started to talk to me about it. And then as you start to get more, because I did not get, like, sometimes you might get a Bible or something, right? Where you've got all of this information. But sometimes also casting works pretty quick where you don't get a lot of backstory. You don't get a lot of information. So, as an actor, you're trying to take things, as much information as you get, and, incorporate it as quickly as you can into your thought process. And, hopefully you make bloody sense at the end of the day, right? But the way they had that set up and the way they did it, it worked. It worked. It's good to go back and do a number of them. And when I know that there was another actor who had been doing this before. Maybe you guys can fill me in on it.
Well, there was it originally started on Star Trek: Deep Space Nine in season 6. And I'm drawing a blank as to the actor's name. I can look it up right now. But it was brought in right near the end of Deep Space Nine's run. And so it was quite interesting to see it brought up in Enterprise as the prequel show that this Section 31 has been around since the beginning.
Yeah. Well, you know as much as I do.
It was Agent Sloan, and it was played by William Sadler.
Thank you.
Well, they tried to put me into his costume.
Yes.
And it didn't work very well. Apparently, he was a thinner than I was, and it was pretty funny because at one point I'm trying on his leather suit, which was basically like leather pants and whatever, leather jacket or something, and I can't get in, and so he costume brings out a truss. And I'm not fat, but he did, but because they were also ending their season or ending the show, and they don't really want to spend any more money on a new suit, right? Mm-hmm. So they made it work by trying to split seams and stuff. And one of the things that was funny was it was hard to move in it, and when I did move, I squeaked a lot. So what became part of the character is he didn't move much. Right.
So you're saying you're playing a sneaky Section 130, you're a Section 31 agent, but
my leather suit was too tight.
And you can't sneak up on anybody?
But it was true.
Right.
Something your fans don't know a whole lot about.
Well, I've got to say, I mean, having a communique going on with Section 31 agent here, Brandon, I'm a little, I don't know, man. I feel like we need to be watching over our shoulders after this, But I've got to say, since we have a contact with a Section 31 agent, I've got to say, next time that you requisition something from your quartermaster, you need to talk to him about maybe changing that uniform. The black leather, it's kind of to be secret. It kind of stands out quite a bit, and I'm sure you would have appreciated it if it had.
Well, you know what? When you're in dark light and you're being very dramatic, I guess you can get away with that. And that's what they did, and super secret, stealth man, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
This who squeaks.
Yep.
So a question about the role. So as a Star Trek fan, and you've been in each of the Star Trek television shows since the original, how do you feel about them bringing in this concept of this seedy, dark underbelly to Starfleet?
Well, why not? I think it just adds, a great other color to an ongoing television series. A lot of the episodes that I've seen over the years, you often have a hopeful kind of idealistic. We're shooting off here, and we're dealing with the various problems we meet along the way. To have, I guess, something coming in from their own history that is also troubling, adds another dimension to it. I don't know. Maybe it just sort of increases its. I guess it adds other colors to a series like that. I like it. Do you guys like it?
I love it.
Oh,
I'm a huge fan of Section 31 myself.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, I would love to do it again. I mean, absolutely. I think when you're going in as a dark secret, or you have a maybe you're shading plots that people can debate over the years. I mean, people come in and they tell me about it. They tell me more about it than I knew. Mm-hmm. Like you guys could tell me more about it than I know.
I'm not much for a conspiracy theorist and stuff, but I mean, I personally think that there are probably portions of our government, like I'm in Canada, and I think that even up in Canada, we probably have portions of our government that have to deal with situations like this, what's the term? Was it above board or below board? What would the term be? I don't know.
Well, I loved your character on that, and I love the idea of it. I mean, if I'd have had my preference, you would have been on there, like coaching an agent or somebody from the very get-go, as far as that show goes,
Yeah, I'm kind of interested as to how they brought it back and what the thought process was with that, but I never heard because, once you're not really in the room, right? What you're getting each script is, it shows up. Here's your script, and this is what you're going to play. And you go in and you ask questions about it, and hopefully the director is completely, clued in. Because the powers that be are not necessarily on the set. The director's there, so you're basically he knows enough, and you're asking him questions, and you don't know as much as they know in the room, and because the writers, I mean, I'm a writer, so I get it, but as an actor, what's cool about it is that you're taking the information, and on the day, you are trying to create, the life from this script and make it work as to the ongoing, especially as a guest star or recurring character, because it's like a baseball analogy. You're not getting up to bat all the time. You're coming in. And so you don't really understand all the nuances of it, but you're doing the best you can to try to get it out there. It would be very cool, for example, in the next show, if I were contacted to say, we'd love you to play this kind of character again from the start. And this is the arc, because you don't know what the arc is, right? You're going in as a recurring character and you're kind of getting it each time you get another script. They're creating their story, their arcs, in the writing room, in production. So, like, if I could go back to Alien Nation, for example, and we'll go back to Harris. When you're doing Alien Nation, you have this incredible, all of these sort of historical things and ceremonies that the newcomers are doing. And the writers are there, and production's there. And directors come in and they go, oh, I don't know, what do you think? I go, well, let's try this, because these are guest directors. They're not really, they're not creating all of this. They're in to direct that particular episode. And after you're doing them as a regular series star, you're in it more than, you're into it. Your head, your body, whole soul, you're into it. So and you can create from dust all of this. For example, when I signed on to do Alien Nation, did I know that I was actually going to give birth on national television? No. Right? So here I am, and I get this wait a minute. You're saying the men give birth? When did this come in? Well, we just thought. You go, okay. So, yeah, okay. So here's what happened. First of all, your wife is going to have to be impregnated by you and another guy. Okay, wait a minute. What? Okay, so it takes two males to impregnate a female. Yes, that's what we've decided. So I said, what woman in the room decided this? Okay, you're right. It was Diane decided that, Diane Frollo, I think. And so I was cracking up. I go, well, what happens now? Well, the pod, I go, there's a pod? Yeah. The pod gets transferred to you, and you carry the pod to term, and then you give birth through your marsupial pouch. Okay. and then you have to believe it. Okay, and then your partner has to help you deliver. Okay, so now you have a bit of like weird stuff going on that my the children and my extended family thought was pretty gross. That Uncle Eric is like having births on TV like this, not to so, all right, to go back to Harris. Okay, if I could give birth on national television, I could bloody well take the information that I'm giving on the day and do Harris, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's funny.
But I love doing Harris because I loved a sort of, there was a very sort of mysterious, dark urgency to all of that. And it was very cool to kind of go in and do that and walk away and feel like you're affecting the show somehow. So it was definitely, if I had to pick all of the characters that I've done on Star Trek, it was nice to, of course, play a Klingon because, as I say, if you're going to do Star Trek, why not play a Klingon? But that's kind of you're one and done.
Mm-hmm.
And all those characters like Captain Sanders, you're in there to advance the storyline of that particular episode. You're not affecting a series of episodes. So I would, if I got to go with your thought, if we could start over, had they contacted me to play Harris for most of the run of that show, I'd have been absolutely thrilled.
Well, you left a good mark on that show because the writers of the novels that take place after the show ends, they continued on with the Section 31 plot line in the books. So,
well, I have to read one someday. I've never read one.
Yeah, they're pretty good. So, what has been your most rewarding acting experience?
Well, for me, Alien Nation, I think has been the most rewarding television experience that I've had, and the reason is that you had very, very challenging experiences. And every day met with a lot of laughs and a lot of creativity and a lot. You're doing something like that as you talk to probably many of the Star Trek actors in your show. It's especially the ones that have been makeup. Guys that have makeup 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and if they're a regular, they're doing this for 16 hours a day. They have no other life going on. They can't. If they're working every day, all day like that, that's it. You're taking your script home and you're working on the next day's, show, and you've got 5 or 6 scenes maybe to work on and study. And maybe you've had the script for a week, so you just keep putting it out there. But it's, I felt that show for me, and now I might have a different answer had I been, Riker or had I been, whatever, Cisco or whatever, I might have a different answer for you. But that's the difference also between being, let's say, a guest star and a series star. But I've done so many over the years. I've done roles on a lot of different shows. I'm Hot Pursuit. I go as far back as, I guess, Hill Street Blues. And I don't know if you guys even remember that show, but it was, very, very kind of to the forefront of new drama, a new wave of drama from the 70s, late 70s on.
Yeah, I was a bit young for that show myself, but yeah, I know that, you've had some pretty impressive roles over your career.
Well, and I hope there's a lot more left. Mm-hmm. And, you just keep going. There's another show that I was just on that's coming out. I'm sure you guys get American TV up in Canada too, or is there a delay, or do you get this?
We get a lot on satellite and stuff.
Okay. So like History Channel, a show that I did, the last show is called 6, and it's about SEAL Team 6. And I play the father of a Navy SEAL who was killed in combat. It's an 8-part miniseries, but it could extend into a series next year as well. It's going to air in, I think, starting in January. And this SEAL Team 6 was the, SEAL team that took down Osama bin Laden. So it's about these guys, and they go off and, they've got to do these, horrific things, and they come back and, they have their home lives as well. And the History Channel doesn't do much, scripted television. I think they have Vikings that's on. I'm not sure what else they're doing, but they're getting into it, like a lot of others are getting into this now. So we'll see what happens with that one. It's just an ongoing thing. You never know what really is going to show up.
You mentioned earlier you're a writer. You're an author of young adult novels. So tell our listeners a little bit about the books that you've written.
Yeah. I had written several screenplays, and one of the screenplays I was asked to turn into a novel. And I write for what are called middle readers, it's kind of the upper end of middle, and then the younger end of young adult YA. I write historical fiction. What I have I call it inspirational action adventure historical fiction. So the central character of both books, there's two books. One is called The Last Ride of Caleb O'Toole, and that is a story about a young boy, 12 years old, and his two sisters in the middle of Kansas. His parents, Caleb's parents, die from a cholera epidemic. It's 1873, and the dying words of the mother is for Caleb to get his two sisters and somehow get them to a relative up in the Montana Territory. And how do they do it? And all the dangers along the way. So he has to go from being this average kid in the middle of Kansas to learning all of these skills in order to survive. And a lot of twists and turns along the way. The second book actually goes, back into the Revolutionary War, into 1781, before the Battle of Yorktown, and the secret mission of William Tuck. And he's a boy whose older brother has been killed by British. And he, is at a, in order to, seek some kind of, say revenge, but value in his life and avenge the loss of his brother, he gets his drum and goes off to be a drummer boy. And in his very first battle, he's blown off of his feet, and he ends up next to a dying man who is a courier, a spy, who has a secret message that's got to go all the way to George Washington. And the spy, the courier, gives him this message, and he has to figure out how to do it. And he partners up with a slightly older girl. The two of them together go off on this great adventure, one step ahead of British spies. So that's the gist of both of them. And what has resulted from that is really, really wonderful tours that I do all across the country. So as a writer now, I'm busy doing school tours. So I go into various schools, various states, and I will sit in front of 300 or 400 kids sitting cross-legged on a gym floor, and I will do presentations for them, right? So I have a whole PowerPoint presentation going off on the screen behind me, and I go through all of these things, and we talk about all kinds of stuff, and I ask for volunteers, and I bring them up, and we talk about anything from frontier medicine to, how do you hide a secret message, and all, and what is historical fiction, and I talk to their teachers, and it's really trying to connect with kids in a way using all of the, history that I've had as a storyteller and as an actor and now as a writer to entertain and educate and get them excited. And it's like when the teachers say to me, oh my God, they're reading, you feel like you've really done your job. And so I'm working on a third book now, which is about the Civil War. But after all of that, I have a very strong idea I've got out to my publisher right now about a science fiction trilogy. I won't blow it because I don't want anybody stealing it. So, just in case anybody is going to be listening to,
that's fine.
that sounds like a great idea. Then all of a sudden, you got 20 people working on the same thing. But I think that what I think is really important in my writing is to also bring diversity into it. So I, put a lot of different historical as well as fictional characters of diverse backgrounds and races and into these books. And with science fiction, that is fertile ground for that. You have so many other, not only, humans, but aliens. And so, God, you could just keep going on and on and on. Plus the invention process rather than, the historical process is a little bit different, but you would have to educate yourself on space travel, on planets, on ideas, and see what's been working and, come up with new stuff. So I think as a writer, I'm going to be pretty busy. So I have these, two careers that I'm kind of working at the same time. And then when one takes over, I kind of try to put the other one aside. And then when that's done, I go back to the other. So that keeps me going, I'm telling you.
Must be very rewarding. I've seen your pictures on Facebook, and it looks like you're having a blast reading to the kids in the classrooms and stuff.
Oh, God. To me, it is so cool because when, I had one girl tell her grandfather, one of the great notices on Facebook that I got is that a guy, got on Facebook and there was a picture of him. His name was Don, and he lives in San Diego. And he was on a hospital bed, and his grandchild was sitting there in front of him, and they were holding up both of my books. I thought, wow, that's it, and then I contacted him and he contacted me back, and one thing led to another. And he said that his granddaughter was reading The Last Ride of Caleb O'Toole very slowly. And so aren't you finished with the book? No, I'm reading it slowly. Why are you reading it slow? Because I don't want it to end. Oh. And I thought, that's the biggest compliment I have ever.
That's so cute.
It's one thing yeah, that was great. I couldn't put it down. There was another thing I only wanted to read it a little bit at a time because I don't want it to end, right? What? That's great. What can we do now? So one thing led to another, and I learned that her school was an underserved school, and that they didn't have money. So I went on a fundraiser, another one. I've done one for each book and had people contribute, and people, pulled through, and they contributed enough money for me to be able to take down, how many did we take on? A couple hundred books, I guess. Mm-hmm. And I went down, drove down there, and they were all delivered. And I got a hotel room the next morning, went to the school, and they had everybody again, sitting around in chairs and on the floor, and we had a blast. And in LA, we have an area, South LA. There's a school there called 107th Street Elementary. Again, underserved school, and in a very rough section of town, I would say. And it was a great school with great teachers there, and it was, these kids were all, just absolutely wide-eyed and ready. And we did the same thing in fundraiser. In a couple of schools we brought books to, and I went down last year and again this past year. I find it very inspirational to me. I loved it. And this last time I went down, and instead of having 400 kids all at once, I went to and did 5 different presentations at 5 different classrooms. I was exhausted by that day. But it was, it's very rewarding for me.
I actually have a 10-year-old son and a 7-year-old son, and I have to say that your books sound like they're right in their wheelhouse. Like we're definitely going to be checking that out.
Yeah, middle readers, and if they're, are they a boy and a girl or what?
It's 2 boys, and we'll definitely be checking it out because they love books like that, like the historical fiction, like you're talking about.
Well, it's a lot of action to keep them going because one of the things you cannot do is bore kids. If they just won't read it, And I was given that advice by my lit agent as well as my publisher. Keep it moving, and especially for boys. And there's not as much out there for boys. I don't know if you found this yet, but there's a little more going on for girls than there are for boys as far as books are concerned. But yeah, can you come up with something that they'll read that they'll find interesting, but at the same time, learn something?
Well, what other projects are you currently working on, and where can people find you and follow you? Where can people buy your books?
Well, they can follow me. They can always bump into my website, which is at ericpierpoint.net. And they can see a lot of stuff that's going on, what I'm doing as an actor and what I'm doing with the kids and all that stuff with the books. The books are everywhere. You can go either order them at bookstores. If they're not there, you can order them, or you can go on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. Yeah, tell your listeners to go out and check them out, especially if they want something that's, does not have vampires in it. Although vampires are fine, don't get me wrong. They're just not in my books. And as far as my acting career goes, I told you about 6, so that's coming up. And I've got believe it or not, a science fiction audition for I can't tell you what it is. I've been sworn to secrecy, but I have a meeting on something that's very funny that is going to air this, January. So we'll see about that. And then each day, we'll just see what comes along. So the life of an actor, you're a little bit of a gypsy. And, the guys from Star Trek, I was just in England, saw a lot of the guys there, Enterprise. And, the same thing with them. You talk to them and they're all going, okay, now what? Sometimes you can get into this actor paranoia that, at this point in life, I've seen it enough that I don't want to ever go there again. It's like, oh my God, am I ever going to work again? That kind of thing. Yeah, you will, you will. Don't worry about it. But when you are, when you've done something like Star Trek, and let's say you've been on it for a number of years, it has such a following that it's always a pleasure for people to then go to conventions and be reminded by people wandering around dressed like you. They love it. I mean, they have this great love of Star Trek. I have a kind of a funny story about that because we can all make fun of science fiction geeks, fans, but we all love this. We all love it, and we make fun kind of with an open heart. But there was one convention I went to, I want to say 15 years ago in Baltimore, Maryland. And it was supposed to be, in fact, was that the Klingon? No. Well, no, it was a different one. But I went there and there was a blizzard. The first night went fine, but it snowed about 3 feet. So the National Guard was out and blocked off the roads. Nobody could go anywhere. So people were stranded for about 3 days at this hotel, dressed as, in Star Trek characters. There's nowhere to go. They're sleeping in the hallways. So you saw everyone, and you've seen it, right? Everyone dressed up as whatever their favorite Star Trek character was. There were a lot of Klingons. There was Star Wars contingent. And start to kind of take on this certain weird Star Wars bar kind of thing, where people are caught. They can't go anywhere. They're running out of food. And the only thing to do was to go to the bar, the lounge, where you would have people sitting around still, like their costumes are a little gamey by this time. They didn't bring clothes. So they were trapped in, they're sitting there with their lightsabers next to their martinis and, whatever. So it was pretty funny. And then finally everybody was released. But I'm sure that most of the food there by the, end of the second day was like, peanuts and cocktails.
That's great.
And you cleaned them out.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, that's the life of an actor and the life of of science fiction fans. And it's great. I guess this is a big year for Star Trek 50th anniversary. And, I only did one, the convention, which was in England, and they had about, 15,000 people there, all having a great time. And the British fans are just as into it as anybody else.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Eric, for coming on. We really appreciate you coming aboard here.
Well, my pleasure.
You're welcome on in Warp 5 anytime, no matter what, whatever you want to talk about.
Okay. Well, why don't we connect, in a few months or something like that. We'll do it again.
All right, Brandon, that was excellent. We actually met with the Section 31 agent Harris, aka Eric Pierpoint. That was amazing. That was great. What do you think about that?
That was a lot of fun. He told some really fun stories about, being an actor and getting some different roles and how to do the audition process. Honestly, though, hearing about his new books, it actually intrigues me because I've read a few books to my daughter. We like to sit down and read together. So I think I'm going to have to pick up his 2 books and have some fun reading them with my 6-year-old daughter.
Oh, yeah, that's going to be easy for me. With my 2 sons, that just sounds like that would be perfect for them. And then also, he almost played Cisco and Janeway.
He almost played Janeway.
They may have, I don't know if they'd have, Catherine, Kate, let's see, what could have been his name? I don't know. It
Chris.
Probably would have been into a Janeway. What was Janeway's fiance's name?
Mark?
Or never mind. Yes.
He thought giving birth to an alien was weird. Well, just with 7 years as a female captain.
Right. The makeup. He, transforming him. Although he actually already has experience with that as on the original series or the Next Generation. He already has experience with it.
Kind of, yeah. So the episode that he was talking about was Liaisons from season 7. So he was on Liaisons. He was on Barge of the Dead from Voyager, and
he was for the uniform on DS9.
Yep. And then Voyager, Enterprise. He was on 4 episodes as Harris, and then he was on Rogue Planet. So
yeah, meeting with Section 31 agents is not the only thing we've been doing on Trek FM this week. So here's what else you may have missed elsewhere on the network.
Previously on Trek.fm, Standard Orbit.
Don't watch any of the extras on the first disc because they're all duplicated over the second disc. So then that way you can just watch them in order and not have to worry about, let me skip this one because I watched it on the first disc and do all that.
Wait, to clarify, they have all the special features in column A on one disc, and then all the special features of column A plus column B on a second disc?
That is correct.
That makes no sense to me at all.
I know, I was very confused when I sat down to watch it.
Melodic Treks.
Matter? I bury nowhere. Oh, it's painful. I don't know. You snowing me? You snowing me?
Painful's just saying Remus and blah, blah. I felt myself falling asleep. I felt like it was my parents were telling me a good night story where you were giving me that track listings there that...
Does it still McFly?
That's one of my favorite ones.
Stage 9, a podcast about the people who make Star Trek.
Within about 15 seconds, you texted me back, Dr. Giggles, we have to do Dr. Giggles. And my question for you is,
Yes.
Why did we absolutely have to do Dr. Giggles?
Saturday Morning Trek.
And all these things just brought in more and more people who thought they were alone, and they found each other, and they made their clubs, and then they made conventions, and that's what the 70s were about, was getting Star Trek back and finding each other.
And that's what else is happening on Trek.fm.
Check out these shows and find out what we're talking about in your favorite corner of the Star Trek universe. You can find us on iTunes, TuneIn, or anywhere you can get your podcasts. And if you want to just go to our website at trek.fm, you can download the MP3 file or grab the RSS link. And if you're an Apple user, please hit that subscribe button and write us a review and a rating. We always love hearing from our fans, and that helps us increase visibility for new listeners. Another way you can help us is keep all of our shows coming to you each week is to become a patron of the network on Patreon. So patreon.com/TrekFM. That's patreon.com/TrekFM. You can find all of our current goals and milestones, and you can help us keep the Warp 5 and all the Trek FM shows coming to your radio. We're a listener-supported network, and every little bit helps, and we surely would appreciate it. You can get more details at patreon.com/TrekFM. Also, if you want to wear your Trek FM fandom, you can find great Trek FM themed merchandise at trekfm.store. So, Brandon, do you have any Christmas list items that are going to be coming from the Trek FM store, or what do you got going on?
Well, not from the Trek FM store, but if anybody wants to buy me Eric Pierpoint's new books, that'd be great. If not, a Trek FM shirt would be nice too. Throw pillow.
Hey, what about both? You could just wrap the books with a Trek FM shirt.
Yeah, I'm looking at you, Floyd.
Uh-oh. So, yeah, I also want to thank co-associate producer Mike Morrison. You can find Mike on the Babel Conference, Trek FM's Facebook listeners group. You can also hear Mike over on Metatrex, where he and his co-host Zachary Fruehling discuss all things philosophical through a Star Trek lens. I'd also like to thank Brandon-Shea for taking over the reins of editing and publishing Warp 5. Thank you so much, Brandon. We surely appreciate that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. It's been a lot of fun. It's way easier editing Warp 5 than it is editing Melodic Treks, that's for sure.
Yeah, I saw you said that. I can bet. So that's cool. I like that, and thank you so much, because I know it takes a little bit. We all do this on a volunteer basis, and we really appreciate Brandon taking care of the editing for us on this. Also, I like to thank Tony Robinson. He hooks us up with very cool show art, and that's how everybody gets to see what we've got going on. Whenever you click on the link or you see our link, it's usually got our show art. It's the first thing that you see. So thank you so much, Tony. If you'd like to get in touch with us here at Trek FM, you can always find us on trek.fm/contact and look on the sidebar on the show page, or you can go to speakpipe.com/TrekFM. You can also contact us through Twitter at Trek FM, Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM, and as we mentioned, the Babel Conference. Type the Babel Conference, BABEL, into the search field on Facebook, or go to our website at trek.fm and click discussion on the menu bar. So thank you so much, Brandon. You set that interview up. You've got the contact with the Section 31 agent. So far, I don't feel like anyone's looking over my shoulder. But I'm gonna be watching for the next week or two to make sure that I'm not being followed.
Yeah, if I could just give you some advice, don't go downtown next Friday at 2 p.m.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, I just won't be on this planet. How's that? I'll just
sounds good.
Riza, here I come. All right. So, yeah, Brandon, if anyone wants to contact you to see if you can also set up some clandestine meetings, how can they get in touch with you?
In dark alleys, of course. That's the best place to find me. However, when I'm not in dark alleys, you can find me here on the network with new episodes of Melodic Treks, which is all about the music of Star Trek. You can find me on Twitter at Brandon-Shea, and you can find me every once in a while in the Babel Conference, poking my head up. And Floyd, where can people find you?
You can always get in touch with me in the Babel Conference, Trek FM listeners page on Facebook. I have a Twitter, but I don't actually use it. So, yep, Babel Conference, Facebook, that's the best place to find me. So, Boomers, thank you so much for listening, and join us again next time for another episode of Warp 5.